Okay,
right.
we're ready to start.
Bring to order the plan and zoning meeting for Wednesday, January 3rd, 2024. If we go ahead and take a roll.
Camille,
Present.
Aaron,
Present.
Brenda,
Here.
Carl,
Here.
Kate.
Here.
Ms. Austin is not here at the moment, and Chair Haggerty.
Here. Good. Okay, quorum. And next topic is the approval of the meeting minutes from the December 5th meeting. If we could have a motion for that. Move to approve. Get a second.
I'll second the motion.
Thank you. Any discussion? Okay, if we could vote.
Kate,
Abstain.
Carl,
Yes.
Brenda,
Yes.
Aaron,
Aye.
Camille,
Abstain.
and Chair Haggerty.
Yes. Okay, so next on the agenda was going to be the approval of findings of facts, but I'd like to suggest that we modify the agenda a little bit. Brenda would like to have a discussion to basically start to discuss whether we want to reconsider the motions of the findings of fact from the last PUD meeting. So with that, we would need a motion to first amend the agenda to make topic number 5 the next topic.
I'll make a motion to make topic number 5 the next topic. Thank you.
Okay, in a second.
I'll second.
Yeah, if we could vote on that.
Camille,
Aye.
Aaron,
Aye.
Brenda,
Yes.
Carl,
Yes.
Kate,
Yes.
and Chair Haggerty.
Yes. Okay, so with that, there was a lot of discussion that we had at the last meeting about the actual PUD itself, as well as some other things that were going on with the waste management and with the site. And with that, Brenda would like to have a discussion to reconsider that vote from last meeting. So with that, we want to make sure that we're following the right groundwork. So Victoria is going to maybe step us through the process that we'll have to follow and just make sure that we're obviously following the correct rules for this process.
Yes, thank you, Chair Haggerty. So this was included in the agenda. It's the excerpt from Bob's Rules of Procedure, which is the procedural rules of parliamentary procedure that the commission follows. And for a motion to reconsider, it needs to be brought at either the same meeting or the next regular meeting of the body, which this is. And then the motion itself must be made by a member of the prevailing side of the original motion to be considered. And then the second can be from either prevailing side or minority side. And then the motion is debatable, but only the reasons explaining or to justify the reconsideration are appropriate for debate. If there's any question about that, a point of order can be raised during the debate and we can work through that as necessary. And then for the motion to pass, it requires a supermajority of 2/3 of the quorum present. So if there's any other questions, we're here to address those.
Okay, so just in summary, we'll have a discussion about why we feel, why Brenda feels this should be reconsidered. We can discuss that. If we want to reconsider it, it would take a member of the party that voted yes last time to say that they would like to have this case reconsidered. We would then need a second. We would then need a 2/3 majority for it to come onto the next meeting agenda that we would go through that process for the reconsideration at that time.
Yes.
Okay, does everyone kind of make sense on that? Yeah. Okay, so we're
And,
gonna have a
oh,
discussion first. Go ahead, Kate.
One question,
Yeah.
for anyone that wasn't here, would we just abstain? Because we wouldn't be changing our vote.
Yes,
Yes, so Kate and Camille would not be able to vote on a reconsideration.
that would be correct because if they weren't present during the public hearing itself, they wouldn't be able to vote originally regarding the PUD application.
Yep.
And so it would, it would mostly be inappropriate for them to vote on the motion to reconsider.
Yeah, and so that would mean you would need to get more than 2/3, which would be 3/4 of the people that can vote to have a reconsideration. So with that, we're not voting on a reconsideration yet, but Brenda, you had, we want to discuss why you would like to have this case reconsidered. Again, not discussing any of the actual facts of the case, but why you think that this vote needs to be reconsidered.
So Chair, if I could get
Yes, please.
clarification from the city attorney. So if Ms. Fuller and Ms. Keys abstain, that leaves us with 4 members, which is less than the planning commission's regular quorum. So is that enough to vote on a motion?
Let me double check one thing about that because it's it's a little unusual.
For like meeting minutes, if people abstain, we don't have to have the full quorum. In my,
Yes,
More, yeah.
at least in the past we have.
yeah. I think it would just require over a 2/3 majority, which would be 3/4 of the people that can vote.
Well,
It's 2/3 of it, but in essence, because there's only 4 people, you'd have to get, half wouldn't work. You'd have to have 3, you'd have to have at least 2/3.
yeah, it's 2/3 of the quorum present.
Right. But if we have 2 abstains. I guess unless the voting members can still vote because all we're voting for is whether we should reconsider it. We're not necessarily voting for the PUD approval or non-approval. Anyone know where Michelle is?
Yeah, sorry, I am
No, no,
thinking
yeah,
it through
that's
and I understand your point about they're not necessarily voting on the merits of the PUD itself. It's just rather or not whether to reconsider, unless they otherwise believe that they would have grounds to abstain. We can allow them to.
Why don't we have the discussion? And then again, we would still need to actually have a vote to reconsider it, whether we want to have that, whether that happens or not. I think we should have some of this discussion, at least initially, and understand maybe what it is again, Brenda, that you think that we should reconsider. So let's have that discussion. I want to have that regardless of what ends up coming up. Are you waiting to make sure? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I'll go ahead if that's okay, Ms. McDermott.
Yes, that's just fine.
Okay.
Great.
Hey, yeah, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity because I really just wanted to make sure everyone was on solid footing with all the information. And I did this because I didn't feel like we had advocated for the citizens enough. And just to kind of explain where I've got all this information, where I'm coming from. In 2019, Public Works Director Marie DeAndrea put out a bid to have a hauler under contract. So just so everybody on staff here knows, or everybody on the board knows, that the city does not find a hauler for us. It is 100% market. They don't have anything to do with finding a hauler. Not sure that everybody understood that. But they put out a bid and then they formed a committee where we would decide on the committee to recommend to city council if they should go with one of the bids or not at all. So we put this bid out. We only got 2, and this was statewide. We only got a response from Republic and Waste Management, and Waste Management in their bid said that they would not provide alley service. Now, we went ahead and put out another bid. We spent a lot of time talking to Waste Management, Republic, and other trash haulers to find out, well, first of all, we didn't get a bunch of bids. Keep in mind, one of the things we found out, of course, besides this, I was shocked that the city does not have any, there's nothing in the charter that says the city will find you a hauling service. However, citizens are mandated to find a hauler. That makes sense. And it also is a law that they have to remove trash from their from their residents. Now, this trash hauling business is for only 18,000 single-family residents. It doesn't include the apartments because they all have, of course, a separate kind of trash hauler, a different kind of truck. And in this scenario, the city would have taken control of the billing. It would have been kind of in your utility bill, and everybody would pay the city. And we would have at least a 5-year contract with one of the haulers. So after a lot of discussion, this went almost 2 years, we put out another bid, and again, only 2. Other companies that we talked to said that the 18,000 homes wasn't worth their time. And I'm just putting this out there so everybody has an understanding of what the market is right now. It isn't like companies are clamoring to get Englewood's business, unfortunately. But again, even in that second bid, and this is under discussion, is Waste Management would not do alleys. The thing is, we have a number of homes where putting your trash out front is physically impossible. You would have to be Arnold Schwarzenegger to drag it up and down the front of the walk. If you want an example of that, look at 2900 Grant Street and 2900 South Sherman Street. Some of that area, there's a few other areas there, but I know the people who live on Sherman and Grant, I've talked to them. But and what the trash hauler said, specifically Waste Management, was that they want to utilize larger trucks instead of the smaller trucks that fit down most alleys. The larger trucks don't fit down some alleys. They still go down many of them, but just not all of them. And the larger trucks are made so that they can, of course, find efficiency in getting more trash and making less trips to the transfer station, right? Ultimately, because of that, citizens went to city council that year and said, we'd rather take our chances with the market. Because Waste Management is not going to do our alleys, and because we don't like Republic's prices and we don't have a wide variety, we're not going to get a contract. So following that, in the summer of 2022, Waste Management did tell everyone that no more alley service. Now that caused some problems. And that one problem was that Republic wasn't taking any new customers either for alley service. And what that was going to look like, because I talked to a city councilman about this, it was going to mean that Waste Management receptacles would be permanently out in the street. And code enforcement would look the other way. And that would also mean that people like Don Roth, who used to serve on this committee, he's in a wheelchair. He would have to go out to his car in the alley and drive around just to drop off his trash. Now, what ended up happening is Republic relented and said, okay, we will do, and I think I put it in here, limited trash alley service on a case-by-case basis for new customers only. And they kind of saved the day with that. Keep in mind that those people do not have alley service though, because the alley, those recyclable, they don't have recyclable services. Those recyclable trucks you've seen have an arm that come out so nobody has to get out of the truck, and goes back down. So that doesn't really square in with the city's sustainable goals. So people who have alley service don't have recycling. Where I'm headed with this is that concerns me in that Waste Management representatives, they're engineers, I know, but they presented themselves as a community-oriented organization for this city. And we really need somebody in case Republic changes their mind. Or one of the things that's happening in this market is going to be fewer choices. For instance, what if Waste Management buys Republic? Then we will not have any alley service, and we will have a situation where the receptacles live in the street. And you can imagine that's not very attractive for Englewood. let alone it kind of creates a parking problem. And some things about the industry you might want to know too, is that for a long time, you've seen small companies kind of come and go. We've had Lies and Garbage Man. Well, and we've had a lot of them over 20 years. What's happened in the industry is that Waste Management Republic will come into a town and they'll buy up the small customers. So an entrepreneur has figured this out. And what they do is they buy a couple trucks, they get about 2 years worth of operating money for them, and they go out and they start snagging customers for a cheaper price. And then they try to sell them back, you see, to Waste Management and Republic. And that worked for a long time until recently. They bought a lot of Waste Connections business. And Waste Connections, instead of buying those customers back, said, we're pulling out of Englewood. So they aren't even taking new customers, unless you want to pay a very high fee, but last I heard, they won't even take customers. So I can just tell you where the market is going, and that we don't have a guarantee from even Waste Management that they'll be our waste hauler past next month. But we are going to be supporting their business for what he testified for 20 to 30 years. And one thing I want to note about that tipping fee is we pay that. That's in your bill. We all pay the tipping fee. And anybody who drops trash off pays the tipping fee. Waste Management collects the fee and gives it to Englewood. And that's good money because they also get it from Littleton and Sheridan, and that's great for the city. But we're going to be dedicated to making sure the streets, the roads, the bridges, and we have done the street already in 21 and 22. We have to make sure that we're obligated for that for 10 to 20 years. And I feel like we could ask for more. We as citizens, the city is gaining something by having to do less paperwork with this PUD. Waste Management, they have an avenue to get them to this conditional use. And it's nice that they're doing the fence. We get some landscape, and they're putting in extra parking so they allegedly don't continue to use our parking lot at Centennial Park. Keep in mind, we've been paying for that too. But I would like to see just one more thing. I would like someone make a motion to reconsider this case, rehear it, and then simply ask Waste Management to, as long as they're going to be our trash hauler, to offer limited alley service on a case-by-case basis to new and former customers. I rest.
Thank you, Brenda, for that summary and conversation. We, as you were stating, are hearing a case for a planned unit development amendment for their building that's on the site. I think we have to make sure that we are concentrating on the facts of this particular case and separate out the requirements for the trash service that is a different committee and a different organization's job to look at and as part of that. And I'm not saying that we can't ask for certain things as part of a PUD. We've done that before. But I just want to make sure that everyone is considering the case that is here and what is being proposed in this PUD and the facts that are being presented here. With that, and before maybe we go a little bit further, Victoria, did you have a determination on how we can move today? Thank you.
Yes, so for the 2 members that were not here last time, if they would need to abstain because they lack sufficient information to vote, so their presence tonight would still count toward the quorum, which is fine. So we would have a quorum, but their abstention wouldn't count toward the tally of yes or no. So essentially, we would need 4 members for this to pass, because we would still have a quorum of 6.
So the quorum number is 6, so 2/3 of the quorum number is 4. So all 4 voting members would have to vote yes to have it reconsidered.
If I'm doing that math right, yes.
Does that make sense to everybody?
Right, but Michelle's not here. So
She's not
it's
a part of the quorum tonight. The quorum is the 6 that are here.
okay.
So 2/3 of 6 is, you would need at least 4 votes to, if it comes to a vote, you would need 4 people to vote yes for it to go to a reconsideration. Is that correct, Victoria?
Yes.
Can I say one more thing? Yeah, I
Yes.
realize that a PUD in this instance is, we're just talking about this building and this structure and what have you. The way I see it is that the PUD is it's in the findings of fact, it's clearly states that it's not necessary. It is just simply a burden of paperwork to get the conditional use permit. So we are doing them a favor. I would like to see a favor returned to the citizens that doesn't just make an advantage for the city and them. I think something more could be offered by Waste Management.
Okay, with that, I'll open up discussion. Aaron?
Yeah, Brenda, I really appreciate your advocacy for the citizens of Englewood and a vital service for trash collection. I agree with Chair Haggerty that, conflating these two issues could be problematic and set in what I see as a dangerous precedent for how we deal with PUD amendments and applications and what kind of leverage this body, who is not charged or chartered to deal with trash hauling issues. It's just not in our purview. So yeah, that's my concern, is that these are just two issues. And I, again, appreciate your advocacy, appreciate your passion about this issue. I just don't think this is the forum to address it.
Go, Camille.
Thanks. So I did read the staff report and I watched the hearing from last time. And I guess my question based on your concern is what the difference between the PUD amendment and conditional permit process is, because it seemed like with the amendment that we had a little bit of leverage to ask for some additional things and get a better project, but I'm not familiar with the conditional use process, so curious what the difference is.
And that's a good question. So I don't know if staff could maybe help. If there were some things that we'd ask for in addition as part of the PUD, maybe not as much as Ms. Hubka would have liked to, but there were some additional things that were asked for. If they went through the conditional use permit, would they have to provide those same things that we've asked for, or would they be able to just do it to minimum standards?
Do I need to be sworn in? No, okay. So this has an existing plan development on it that was actually approved in 92 and amended in 93. Actually, it was amended in 92, but not recorded until 93. And so any change like this, there's really two options. One would be to amend the original PD, which follows the same process as amending a PUD nowadays. Okay. And that's what we're doing, or what the commission has been doing up to now. Okay. The other option would be to vacate the original plan development, which would go by the same process as vacating a PUD nowadays, meaning we would be going through this process to get rid of the original plan development and then following that up with a conditional use permit application. A conditional use permit application goes through the Planning and Zoning Commission. So it's really the same thing, okay? The Planning and Zoning Commission, even with the conditional use permit application, the reason it's called a conditional use permit is because the Planning Commission can put conditions on it. Staff can recommend conditions, which staff has recommended in terms of fencing and landscaping and those sort of things, as has the commission up to now. So they're really not very different. And the only difference is a conditional use permit does not go to city council unless it's appealed. And a PUD can be appealed as well. So it's really kind of 6 of one, half dozen of the other. One process goes through Planning and Zoning Commission twice. the other ones. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you. So I kind of wanted to follow it up with a summary and another question. So essentially by going through this process, we're going through one process as opposed to two processes to get to the same outcome.
Correct.
Okay, and then if we were to go through that vacation process, we'd be vacating the PD, which would then leave it with just the, is it I1 zoning?
Correct.
So then we'd be putting a conditional use on top of the I1 zoning.
Correct.
And my understanding was that PUD amendment that is being proposed and was voted on approval last week also had some additional restrictions set that don't exist in I1, like height restrictions and the setbacks were greater, I think. So I think, I guess I'm just
Okay.
pointing out the differences, but I think that's interesting. The single process does seem to get to the same outcome.
I guess I'll build on that a little bit. If we do go to a reconsideration, would that mean that the PUD proposal would be brought forth again? Or what, if that was a vote and it got the majority, what would be that next step?
So if a motion to reconsider is brought and that were to pass, we would notice the meeting at a date when we're providing enough notice for the applicant and for members of the public to be present. At that point, if different or additional conditions were proposed, that would be voted on at that time.
Brenda?
Oh, I just want to mention one thing because you mentioned it in your statement. There is no more trash task force, by the way. That's shut down. Just so you know, there isn't a group out there that takes care of trash. It's just not a thing. So just so you know, Waste Management could stop serving us the minute they build this thing. Just saying. Now, I just want you all to have this information. You don't have to vote for it tonight. I may talk to City Council anyway, because they probably need to do this.
Sure, and maybe that is the reality is that needs to come through another venue, because regardless of whether we approve or not, they could still go do something else if they want to. What I am also seeing is the reality that we have an open air transfer facility right now that is open to the elements, that is open to wind and other things moving around. And I feel like we're getting benefits from the proposal that the applicant put together. I understand where you're coming from of alley service. It's a pain in the rear as I was loading my garbage cans out tonight. Before I came here, in a relatively parked down street, you know, it is a pain, but I think that needs to come through a different venue than this particular PUD is my thought on it. But again, yeah. Any other thoughts or comments you'd like to make?
I guess I have one
Yeah,
other
please.
question. It was a bit unclear to me on whether so let's say this project falls through and then 10 years in the future, another building is proposed. Will that need to be enclosed or can it be open air? Is the enclosed requirement a requirement, or is that just a proposal for this particular project?
So your question is, if the new building burns down, well, the new building is going to have a lot of fire suppression and those kinds of things, but without getting into the details of that, yes, as part of the proposal, those things kind of become somewhat locked in place. There are provisions for minor amendments that can be approved administratively, but by and large, that big of a change for a fully enclosed building would be required in the future. But yes, what they're proposing is to not ever have to do that. This is a multi-million-dollar investment for them.
And similarly, if something happens to the fence, they have an obligation to put back. the
Correct.
Same heights and the landscaping the same and all that, correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
They have a site plan that is part of the PUD that was approved.
But there is no requirement for them to provide service to Inglewood as part of any of the building that they.
No.
Yeah.
Not as part of the PUD.
Any further, Carl? Yeah.
My concern, when, during the hearing was the, parking. I asked, whether there was 30 cars or so parked across the street in the park where Inglewood developed a parking lot, they maintained the parking lot. And waste management people are basically the only people that park there except in the summer when they have baseball games over there. My concern was that in the new build, did they have spaces available to absorb those 30 cars? And I asked how many people worked there and nobody knew. And that was a little bit of a concern that they have no idea how many people work there, so they don't know how many cars are going to be needed. And I didn't ask about spaces, but I assume with the new property, the RV storage lot over there definitely could have enough parking, but that may be inconvenient to walk to that back southwest corner, but that was my concern, was the parking. And the other thing is the Union Street. We do get the tips from per truck. Inglewood gets some money, but they don't get enough money to repave Union constantly. That street is a mess. And it's actually, I'm surprised that they don't come back to Inglewood to try to get that. That's a lot of damage to a truck driving over a rough road like that. And the money used for paving Union, we could get a subsidy from Waste Management for that. And the parking is if they can absorb all those 30 cars in the baseball parking lot over there. But I asked about the number of people there and they had no idea. They didn't say anything. They said they didn't know.
And I have not gone back and re-watched that. I felt like they discussed the number of employees that they had and that they had sufficient parking, but maybe I'm not remembering that the same way that you are, so. But go ahead, Brenda. Yeah.
Oh, I was gonna say, I did find out that the tipping fees we collected in 2022 was 744,833. And I got the tipping fees for 2023 through November. That was $760,468. We have the $2.5 million bridge restriction, but there's two things I did not get. There were two projects on Union Street already. And I saw them on the Inglewood Engage site when we repaved Union. We'll probably be repaving Union Street every 10 years, whereas most side streets are like every 15 to 20, just so you know. So I don't know, it kind of pays for itself, but yeah, we are subsidizing that street.
Thanks for that additional info. Carl, I know you said you had concerns or anything else you wanted to bring up? In part of this. Okay. Any other discussion anybody wants to have? So at this point, we would need a motion to reconsider if that's going to be the next step.
I do have a question about when we had the hearing. We had the hearing and voted on the same night. Is that going to be a standard process? Council does not do that. Council will have a hearing and then 2 weeks later they'll vote on it.
Well, so we have the hearing, we present the findings of fact, and then we approve the findings of fact at the next meeting, which would be what we would do next if that's what we decide to move forward with. And I think that's the way we've always done it. Unless I'm missing something, yeah.
Yes, that's the way we've always done it. Council procedure is just different.
So with that, any motion? Okay. Okay. Thank you, honestly, Brenda, for all the information. I do, yes, and appreciate that and appreciate that we're continuing the discussion that we have here. So in the cordial environment that we have, like we're all here to listen to each other. So with that, go ahead, Aaron. And there's no motion to table because the next step would then be to go to the next item on the agenda. Unless I'm mistaken, yeah, okay. So the next item on the agenda is the approval of the findings of facts for case number ZON 2023-002, planned unit development for the waste management facility. So with that, I'd open up. I think I'll need a motion to open up the approval for the findings of fact, and then we can have a discussion after that. Is that correct, Victoria?
That's correct. Yes.
Thank you.
Sure.
All thrown off today. So motion to approve the findings of facts, then we'll have a second, then we'll have a discussion, and then we'll vote. Anyone at all besides me?
I move to approve the findings of fact.
Thank you. In a second.
All right, yeah, who said
I'm
second that?
sorry, who was the second?
Brenda's
was
Oh,
seconding
Brenda
it.
was second. I
Yeah.
thought I heard her say abstain.
These two are abstaining. Although if Camille did watch everything, I think she has the option to, if you like to, if I'm not mistaken, if she's caught up.
So it's within your bylaws, on the hearing of
is.
cases that if you weren't present at the public hearing, you can't vote.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Never mind. Thank you for watching anyways. Yes. Okay, so with that, discussions on those findings of fact?
What would be a reason not to vote on the findings of fact? Seriously, it's just the findings of fact, right? You would have to disagree with.
With what was
With
written
the
down or
numbers,
some of the
yeah.
conditions that were put. So we have some additional conditions that were added. Were all those included correctly? So those additional conditions were.
Mhm.
Should we have the training on finding the facts before we vote on it?
That'll be for future.
Since it's on.
It is on there, yeah, you're absolutely right. But we're moving forward with these findings of fact, and then we're gonna have some supplemental training to help us make sure that we're presenting those in the correct way.
Right, right.
So the additional conditions were a minor subdivision to combine the two properties prior to the permit applications, a 10-foot opaque wood fence constructed along the residential property line on the south, 6-foot fence on the north property line of the expansion. Updating the final drainage reports for additional parking, and landscaping to be increased to 8% of the total area of the property. Yeah. So unless there's any discussion, then we would vote. We can vote.
Camille,
Abstain.
Aaron,
Aye.
Brenda,
Yes,
Carl,
Aye.
Kate,
Abstain.
and Chair Haggerty.
Yes. So with that, the motion passes. onto public forum, opportunity for public to address items not on the agenda. Anybody in the public here to address the council? An item is not on the agenda? Okay. With that, we'll pass the, we'll skip over the public forum and go into a study session. Others in the audience, if you want to hang out and listen to us, that's great. If not, that's totally acceptable also. Thank you.
So good evening, good evening, commissioners. Let me get this. There we go. So I'm just here to present some training materials on findings of fact. So why do you use these? Essentially, it explains the decision of the commission to the city council and provides the factual basis for your recommendations on your decisions. Findings of fact provide an applicant with an understanding of the facts that were used to approve or deny their request. And these findings can help enable the applicant to determine whether or on what basis they could potentially have a further judicial review. And they support the city's decision on the issue should it ever be challenged or presented to courts. So what are they? So findings of fact, it's a common term used to refer to the city's written explanation of a land use decision. The term originates from the courts, where judges often explain their determinations by issuing documents entitled findings of fact and conclusions of law. The findings of fact recite the relevant facts and then make conclusions by applying those facts to the relevant legal criteria used to assess a land use application. So why are they so important? While findings of fact play a crucial role in providing the city council and the applicant with the reasons for the commission's decision or recommendation, findings of fact help to provide evidence that should ultimately make the city council's decisions legally defensible. If there's ever a challenge of the city's decision on a land use application, the court will review the absence of findings of fact or the absence of substantial evidence to support findings when deciding whether to reverse or remand a municipal land use decision. Written findings of fact supported by substantial evidence should be provided whether or not a planning commission envisions the approval or denial of an application or request being challenged in court. So how do you make them? The findings of fact can be created through orderly analysis of an application where evidence is linked directly to the planning commission's conclusions. To create legally defensible findings, the commission can follow this procedure. Identify the relevant legal criteria, such as the statutory standards or code provisions that are applicable to the land use application. Identify facts from opinions that were presented at the public hearing. If facts related to the request should be identified and should be supported by substantial evidence. The commission should avoid utilizing opinions and rendering decisions, as most opinions cannot be supported by substantial evidence, and then form a decision that links the applicable law with the supporting facts or absence of them. For example, say a zoning text and map amendment requires that it be generally consistent with the city's adopted comprehensive plan. If an amendment is proposed and found to be generally consistent with the comprehensive plan, that's a finding that should be included in the record and in the findings of fact. So this slide goes through the legal criteria for various applications that come before the commission with citations to the new UDC sections. So before setting out to find facts, we would look at those different criteria and to assess what the relevant legal standards are. When staff includes these relevant, these review criteria in their staff report that gets submitted to the commission. And then the next step would be to identify the relevant facts. So findings of fact should state all the relevant facts the city considered in making its decision. The fact is relevant if it proves or disproves that the application meets the legal standards that are set forth in these code sections. So for instance, if an application is seeking a conditional use permit where the effect of traffic on adjacent properties is one of the legal standards, then we should be looking for facts related to traffic impacts. So like a math exam in school, it's important to be complete and to show your work, which is essentially what findings of fact are. So explaining the method of reasoning the city followed in judging an application helps to ensure the city is on the right track. If someone looking at the findings of fact can tell how you reached your result without having to guess, you've shown your work. But if someone is left guessing, then we may be on shaky legal ground. A simple technique to ensure findings of fact sufficiently connect the decision to the legal standards is to use the word because. So you take the legal standard and then add because at the end and then insert the fact. So this, the application is consistent or not consistent with the comprehensive plan because, and then insert the relevant facts that came forth at the public hearing in order to make your finding a fact. Now, it's important not to assume that anyone looking at the findings of fact is familiar with our legal standards or Englewood at all. So be complete and comprehensive when putting those together. And again, it's also important to stay on track by focusing on the relevant facts and the relevant legal standards, because sometimes issues arise that don't relate to those relevant facts or standards. And if city officials start to discuss and debate the facts of the application without limiting themselves to the relevant legal standards or the relevant facts, we could potentially waste time or get off track in what our conclusions are. So in conclusion, written findings should identify the relevant legal criteria, explain the relevant facts about the particular application, and then apply those facts to the legal criteria to reach a conclusion. And if we take care to develop thoughtful findings of fact that relate to the relevant legal standards and the relevant facts, there should be no mystery as to why the city reached the decisions that it does on different land use applications. So if there's any questions, happy to answer or address them. But that's what I have.
Thank you, Mr. McDermott.
Thank you.
Yeah, Brenda, look like, or Carl?
Seems like the legal criteria, that seems like it should come out before the finding of, like we just approved finding the facts for the hearing of the last meeting. Seems like the finding of facts should come out before or during the beginning of the hearing to show that, they meet this area, they meet this, they meet this, they meet this. And then it's our job to find out where the holes are that they didn't meet.
So that's a good question. And what happens in the staff report that's submitted to the commissioners, staff will include the different legal criteria that is required to be looked at. And I based on my review, they do include whether or not what facts they believe are either support or refute that criteria when they make their recommendation to the commission. Now, what's important is because when you don't want to prejudge an application before it comes to the public hearing. So you get the staff report and you look at that. And then when you have the public hearing, that's when the evidence comes out in full. It's when staff provides the evidence that they're relying on and making their recommendation. So we want to make sure that we are getting all the evidence at the same time and we're hearing it all within the context of the public hearing.
Okay, so in the context of the public hearing, that's, so if the applicant makes a statement and opens up, says something that may not be relative to the findings of fact, but nevertheless provides this board with evidence of something outside that, the board can still can examine that evidence, right? Even if it's not in the findings of fact, right?
So again, thank you for the question. And in that scenario, what would be the best practice would be to ask the applicant the questions that you would have about what they've opened up during the public hearing. If there is something that a commissioner is aware of outside because of their certain facts that they deem relevant that they have that have not been presented in the public hearing, this is where we get into the areas where as a quasi judicial body, the commissioner would need to make the rest of the commission aware of what those facts are based off of their knowledge. And there would be a potential question about whether or not the commissioner would need to recuse themselves because they're acting as a fact witness as opposed to a judge. Because as a quasi judicial body, the commission is essentially adjudicating the application that comes before it when they make the recommendation to council. That's when the commissioners are putting on their judge hat, and in order for due process and to make sure we're being fair, we don't want you to be on both sides where you are presenting evidence as a witness and also then acting as the judge and deciding the application. And that's when we would have the question about whether or not a commissioner would potentially need to recuse themselves.
Can I maybe build on your question, Brenda? Because I think it might have been, were you saying during the public hearing, if they present something that wasn't necessarily a part of the staff's findings of fact, like if it's kind of additional information at that time, is that acceptable for the applicant to provide? And yeah, I think, was that per?
Right, and again, then we can ask him about it. I mean, we can bring it up.
Absolutely.
If he's brought it up and it's not part of the findings of fact, and then we can
Let's
say,
say-
hey, we don't find, I have evidence to the contrary of what you just said. You know you get what I'm
the
saying?
Findings of fact come out of the public hearing and out of our vote from it. So I'm not sure what you're saying by is part of the findings of fact, because that will come out after.
Yeah, this is the record of what was presented by the applicant, by public comment, by discussion.
Right, it's
decisions.
from
This is the
all,
record of all of that after the fact.
yes,
back
and,
up.
and I apologize for interrupting, but yes, like it's that whole record that's from there that you're making the findings of fact. I think what you might be talking about is if there's something that's not in a staff report or in the packet, is that what you're getting at?
Right. I guess I'm getting at that. It's that, the applicant during the hearing process makes a presentation. We see it in the PDF and says, look at here's my reputation. And I'm staking my reputation on this project. Can we not ask him about their reputation or say, hey, I have evidence to the contrary?
So my answer to that is kind of twofold. Yes, absolutely. You can ask questions of the applicant about information that they present, and we provide the opportunity for that to happen during the public hearing before it's closed. If we're then getting into a situation where a commissioner has evidence of something that they need to present, that's when we could fall into the matter that I was talking about earlier, where there might be a potential conflict of interest where the commissioner would be acting as both a fact witness because they have evidence of something that they are now trying to present. That's what I was trying to get at.
I think you're saying something like, if the developer, he was the guy next door to me. Okay, all right, I got
Well,
you.
And I also think, as Corey mentioned, we are judging the facts that are presented in front of us for this particular case. We're not supposed to bring in outside information that we have knowledge of, or, reasons why we are for or against a certain organization. We are supposed to base our decisions on staff report and what is being presented at that public hearing.
Yes, exactly. So to kind of pull more from your example, Commissioner Hupka, it wouldn't just be that, oh, the developer is my neighbor and we're buddies. It would also be the developer is my neighbor and has revealed X, Y, and Z to me that is now relevant for us to consider when we're looking at this application, and we didn't know it before, but I know of it because of this other situation.
I just want to make a clarification. You're talking about how we decide and make decisions and the judging. As far as the hearing goes, no information shall be withheld if it's out there. I mean, like, there's nothing that narrows information when this hearing is presented. I mean, when they present their case and here's the information and they've presented it, we can question any of those pieces of the information, right?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm gonna spiral off that with a question. If new information comes to light during a public hearing from the applicant or from even like public comment or something, we can also consider that in the findings of fact or in our findings of fact.
Yes, absolutely. Excellent question. Absolutely, because it's now part of the public hearing. It might not have been in the packet that you all received, but now it's oral testimony that you can consider.
Just to make sure I'm understanding though, realistically, we are not supposed to be bringing that additional information that should come from either the public or the applicants themselves.
That would be the best practice, yes. When that situation arises where a commissioner is the fact witness, that's when we run into the situation of a potential conflict of interest where they may need to recuse themselves from voting on the underlying application.
And I'm sorry, I might have missed this in your presentation, but is it staff who produces the findings of fact?
So traditionally what has happened, when the commission votes on an application, there are statements made about what the findings of fact are. And then, yes, staff prepares the findings of fact that you all then receive at the next meeting. And then you vote on whether or not that is actually accurate based off of the evidence presented.
Is it fair to say that this is sort of like approving minutes of a specific decision or action? I mean, this is where staff's putting together what was presented, the relevant, clearly facts. Is that a fair comparison?
Yes, I do think that's a fair comparison. Because yeah, it's a reflection of what was discussed at the prior meeting.
I have a related but different question, kind of changes gears a little bit. Everyone's okay with that? Okay. Conditions. What are allowable for conditions or how are those established? Yeah, I mean, obviously we've requested things, staff requests things, the limitations on that, what are conditions?
So condition, that's a bigger question. Sometimes the conditions that are allowable are set forth in the code. We just need to make sure that they are legal and defensible.
So on previous PUD applications like the Oxford Station, for example, that was adjacent to the Oxford Bridge, we'd ask for them to contribute funding to the bridge. And I was like, that's great. That sounds awesome. Where does that line get drawn? What is that is allowed? Yeah.
Sure. So I mean, those conditions need to be tied to the project itself and the project's actual impacts. And I mean, that's primarily where it's looked at, where the line gets drawn.
Vicky, can I provide a
Yeah.
comment for that too?
Absolutely, please.
I talked to the Public Works Director recently about that kind of condition that we put on where they have to provide monies toward a specific type of project that we have in our capital plan, our capital improvement plan. And what he says, it generally is driven by the amount of increase that they are creating with that project. So those multifamily projects near that pedestrian bridge, we're bringing an increase in people to that area that would now require the use of that pedestrian bridge. If you have a project that is not creating like a traffic increase, that's when you will generally see staff not request additional money for a project because the traffic is already generated on site and the new project is not generating any additional traffic. But if it was a new project that was generating additional traffic, it's likely that you would see us provide a condition that says, you know, they have to provide this traffic improvement or money towards this project or something like that. So that's generally where that comes from. But I'm just trying to repeat some of the words of our great Public Works Director, Victor Rochelle.
Yeah, that's great information. And so to build on that before you go, Brenda, typically the staff would make that initial part as part of your staff report that you would recommend some sort of contribution if you think that it is relative to a specific capital works project. You would be able to put that in your staff report before we met.
Generally, it would come from
Okay.
our Public Works Department before it ever got to you guys.
Good, Brenda.
sounds very subjective to me.
I mean, I think if this was, for instance, on this one tonight, if this was a brand new waste management facility, it wasn't there before, increase in traffic, and they would probably note some of those things. Is there some subjectivity to it?
But nothing in writing.
Say again?
Is there anything in writing?
Well, they had a traffic
Just-
report that said that they weren't increasing.
No,
traffic
not the
counts, yeah.
traffic report. I'm talking about conditions.
Can you maybe repeat the question?
Yeah, the conditions are there, do we have something in municipal code or the charter?
For specifically on traffic impacts, I mean, I'd have to go back and look to see what exactly any criteria are that we've set in code on conditions, but it's basically just based on the assessment of the impact of the project on surrounding areas that would then necessitate additional contribution.
Oh, I get what it is. It's a process, it's just an internal process. It's not part of the municipal code or the city charter, correct?
Without going back and verifying that, I believe that's correct. But certainly commissioners have every opportunity and are encouraged to ask questions of staff on those recommended conditions.
Awesome. Any other questions? I guess maybe one just follow-up question before I let you step away. I know. Typically speaking, we vote, we can provide some additional notations on what those findings of fact are. Are there maybe recommendations on how we could make those better or stronger, and maybe not something you have to deal with right now, but maybe something that you could provide to the commissioners just to make sure that we are, making these as good as possible for staff?
Yes, that's definitely something that we can provide. Perhaps I'm thinking of like some sort of document that we can provide to the commissioners, like as a decision-making matrix kind of process. Okay, we can do that. Absolutely.
That would be great. Thank you.
Sure.
And appreciate all this information as well. And what's this, are these all I missed that last slide, I'm sorry. Are those all the kind of the relevance
Yeah,
documents that we
exactly.
should be reviewing?
Yes.
I don't think that's in our packet,
The-
that slide. Oh, it is. Yeah, okay. I'm sorry. It is. I thought it was the last slide. It was not the last slide.
And that's just that's to the revised UDC that was
Perfect.
recently adopted.
I'd also like to note that I did find the X.
Very good.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, there's
Thank
no other questions. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Okay, with that, we go to staff's choice.
We just have an update on our staffing. I don't know that many of you met Ryan Herring. He was one of our planners. He has left us for another opportunity. However, we had the privilege of welcoming back Mr. Will Charles into our group. He started yesterday. If you remember, some of you may remember him. He was a planner for about 5 or 6 years in our organization, left for another opportunity, but we're so great he came back. So he came back and we welcomed him back yesterday. So you may be seeing him soon.
Thank you. Anything else from staff?
Nothing from me.
All right. With that, I believe we are on to attorney's choice.
Nothing else for me tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. And with that, we'll go commissioner's choice. I'll start at my end here, Carl.
Nothing for me.
Brenda,
I've said enough.
Brenda, Kate,
Thanks, Victoria, for your training tonight.
Bill.
Thank you, everyone, for voting me as a regular member on the planning commission. I'm really excited to serve with everyone.
Thanks for joining us. Go ahead, Aaron.
Nothing from me. Thanks.
The only other thing, if there's other items that we feel like we need future training on, I think staff and our attorneys are wealth of resources. So if there's other thoughts of things, want to be the best commission that we can be. And I think that knowledge is what makes us better. So any other ideas, I think we'd love to have them. And with that, I don't have anything else. So next meeting, I guess, do we have anything on scheduled PD wise or anything that we'll need to look at? No, so
Nothing right now.
Does that mean, don't we have to meet every certain amount of time? I believe maybe once a month or quarter or something is part of, is that not a requirement?
I do know towards the end of last year, we discussed doing a training on PUDs.
Hmm.
And I think we were waiting on new commission members to be appointed before we do that. So that may be one of the upcoming meetings. I don't have a timeline because Vicky's the one that has to give the training and
Thank you for that. We can get that on schedule.
Yes. Okay, and I think we will need a few additional members. Is that accurate?
Say that again.
We'll be gaining a few additional members. Is that-
Camille's been moved up from the
right.
last meeting to an alternate. Kate has decided at this time not to reapply, so we will have at least two new appointments.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, Kate, thank you for all of your service over these number of years. It's been awesome having you. And again, welcome Camille as full-time and look forward to getting a few more, and we'll look forward to Kate coming back and joining us very soon. Okay, with that, we can adjourn. Thanks, everyone.